Very much. Selamat Hari Malaysia to everyone. I'm very happy to be here, to have three really great speakers to share their thoughts and their mind. I will introduce one by one, all three of them, you will heard about them, Philip Golingai, Prof. James Sin, and Prof. Dr. Kartini. Philip Golingai will be the first speaker. So what I'll do is I will share a little bit about Philip to all of you. And then, we will listen to Philip. And after that, I'll go one by one and introduce the rest. Now, Philip Golingai is a news editor at Star Media Group. He writes 2 columns, One Man's Meat on Wednesdays, and it's Just Politics on Sundays. The second one is one of my favorite columns. Yeah, thank you very much, Philip, for making sure my Sunday mornings are very interesting. From 2006 to 2010, Philip was the Star's Thailand correspondent based in Bangkok. He was also the editor of ASEAN News Network, an alliance of 24 Asian news organizations in 20 countries. He was the industry advisor for Department of Journalism, Institute of Brahman, Utah, from 2016 to 2019. Philip has won 4 Malaysia Press Institute Journalism Awards. Now give a hand to Philip and let's pass the floor and listen to Philip's sharing on Sabah, political dynamics of Sabah. Thank you very much. Over to you, Philip. Philip, yeah. Philip, your sound, Philip.
Okay, apologies. I forgot to switch on. Okay, I'll go straight now because I lost 22 seconds.
No worries.
What I will be talking about is on the Sabah Politics 101. Next slide, please. Okay, the thing about Sabah politics is for most people in Peninsular Malaysia or even in Sarawak, it's very confusing. It's as confusing as the ethnic group in Sabah. For example, like in Peninsula, you will have Malay, Chinese, and Indian. But then in Sabah, you will have Kadazan, Bajau, Suluk, Bugis, Murut, Bisaya, Rungus, Sungai, Lundayo, and I'm not done yet. And there are 40 plus more. Okay, next slide. So the thing about Sabah is why it's confusing is because of the Sabah alphabet soup political parties. I'll quickly go through and then see whether you know any of this party if you're not from Sabah. Okay, PBS, PBRS, UPCO, PCS, SAPP, STAR, USNO, LDP, Warisan, etc., 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 plus the National Party. So it's very confusing because, for example, people won't know the difference between PBS and PSB. PBS is Parti Bersatu Sabah and PSB is, James Chin will know this, Parti Sarawak Bersatu, which is in Sarawak. So the problem with studying Sabah politics is it's just too many small little parties and then there's too many things going on. And then the alphabet soup parties also, many people can't remember. Next slide, please. So that's why, for example, National Pollster, most of them, they avoid polling in Sabah because first of all, they don't understand the politics. Plus, it's actually very difficult to poll Sabah. Yes, you can do a polling in, just say, for example, Kota Kinabalu, but try going to, just say you want to poll Bung Mokhtar's seat, which is Kinabatangan. It is the size of Pahang. So can you imagine, you have to poll the whole Pahang to get to understand it. And then the problem also with, just say the challenges covering Sabah is for the pollster who are based in Peninsular Malaysia, for them is Sabah is the non-unknown, meaning they don't know anything about Sabah lah. Okay, next. Okay, many people assume, or some people assume that Sabah and Sarawak, the politics is the same. Same because they are at South China Sea, at the other side, and then they're part of Borneo, and then, I mean, it's the same, isn't it? What's the difference? Sarawak, Sabah, Sabah, Sarawak, Kuching, or Kota Kinabalu. But there are differences. Okay, I'll tell you the differences. Next, please. Okay, based on the differences, see whether you all know which state is politically stronger. Never mind, you can guess. Okay, the difference is, number one, the first difference for me Actually, I got this idea when I was covering Sarawak election in 2016. I was sitting in a pub. It's always happening when you go to Kuching. So we were in a pub during, yeah, we were in a pub during election. I was talking to Sabah politician, and then we all agreed there's three major differences between Sabah and Sarawak. Okay, first difference is the Sarawak government, which is ruled by Gabungan Parti Sarawak. It consists of 4 local Sarawak parties. Okay, the emphasis or the hint is local Sarawak parties. Whereas Sabah government, it's ruled by GRS. And GRS, it consists of national parties, Bersatu and UMNO. Okay, and also Sabah-based parties, PBS, STAR, PBRS, and SMPP. So if you notice, it's a mix of national parties plus Sabah-based party, and normally and usually since the fall of PBS in 1994, it's the national party which is in control of the state politics, except for in when was it 2018 until 2020, when Warisan, a local party, plus national party ruled Sabah. So just say since 1994, it has been ruled by national parties. Unlike Sarawak, which I think it has been since independence, it has been ruled by Sarawak-based party. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, because of my point 1, the difference is the difference is in terms of point number 2 is the CM of Sarawak is the CEO of the ruling party because of PBB. Abang Jo, the chief minister, he is the president of PBB, whereas the Sabah CM, technically he's a branch manager because his CEO is Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin, the Bersatu president. So there's a difference actually. I think you'll understand. The CM is CEO, whereas the Sabah CM is branch manager, and it can mean a lot. Okay, point number 3. Slide number 3. Okay, this is a term that Sabahan use, which is photocopy Sabahan and ori Sabahan. So there's a sizable photocopy Sabahans who are voters in Sabah, whereas in Sarawak, most of the voters are ori Sarawak. Okay, what is a photocopy Sabahan? Photocopy Sabahan is, okay, maybe they have Sabah IC, maybe it's genuine, maybe it's a bit dubious or a bit funny, but most politicians, if Sabahan, when you ask them, they will tell you there's something strange with these voters. During the PBS time, they were called phantom voters, and then maybe they come from a neighboring country, like for example Indonesia or Philippines. So there's a big number, a sizable number of them. And even in terms of population, our population in Sabah, I'm Sabahan, our population is quite huge, and it's maybe they are photocopy Sabahans. Whereas in Sarawak, I've been to Sarawak, etc., etc., they have a stronger, I don't know how you say it, immigration rule, and then most of the voters are original Sarawakian. So that's the dynamic. The dynamic is different in terms of the photocopy Sabahan versus the ori Sabahan. So ori Sabahan, ori means original. The original Sabahan maybe have a different political aspiration compared to the photocopy. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, and then the other thing, especially when they always like to say, okay, why don't Sabah has 25 MPs. Why don't they bersatu or be united and then push for the Sabah agenda? Okay, the problem with that is it's when you look at the political affiliation of the MPs. For example, 8 MPs are from Warisan. Warisan is a local party. However, 6 of the Sabah MPs are with Bersatu, is a national party. UMNO has 2. Technically, all of them are actually UMNO MPs, but they jump, which I'll jump into jumping later soon. So they are, okay, how many? Bersatu 6, UMNO 2, national party MPs. The same with DAP. DAP has 3, PKR has 2, Then in terms of local we only have Warisan, PBS has only one, PBRS has one, UPO one, Star one. So in total, in terms of the Sabah-based party MPs, we only have 12, whereas the national parties, they have 13. So I give you one example. Just say the MP. Okay, maybe in his heart, he has the Sabah agenda in his heart, but he still need to listen to their president, who's a national-based party. So the national-based party might have a different look of the Sabah agenda. They see it maybe through the eyes of Putrajaya or the eyes of maybe in a bigger picture, Malaysia. So it's a bit different. It's because of the party. Whereas arguably, Professor James Chin might can add into this, but maybe the Sarawak MPs, a bulk of them who are in the ruling party, they are mostly GPS. They are all of the GPS MPs are from local parties. So maybe there's a difference in terms of that. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is the one thing that kind of annoy me when Semenanjung people talk about Sabah voters, especially the opposition voters, They will say, for example, you know, this new government, they said, see, look at the Sabahan or look at the Sarawakian. Because of them, they support this present government. They don't support the opposition. If they supported, therefore, the opposition will be in the government. So for them, is they kind of like to look down on Sabahan because they think that their political view is superior than how Sabahan vote. But for me, is I think Sabahan voters are way ahead of the opposition voters in Peninsula, with the exception of Kelantan, Terengganu, and Kedah. I'll explain that in the next slide. Okay, so oh, sorry, I think okay, never mind. Can you go back to the other slide? Oh, okay, it's missing. Okay, never mind. One slide is missing. I give you the difference. In 1994, in 1985, Parti Bersatu Sabah, a local party, managed to, I use the word, kick out Barisan Nasional in the Sabah government. So it meant in 1985, before the 2013 tsunami in Peninsular Malaysia, Sabahans already knew what to do. They were already much more advanced. They were already at that time unhappy with the Barisan Nasional rule, especially ran by Berjaya, a local party, which is what? So in 1980, that's in 1985. So the voters in Peninsular Malaysia, it took them only what? Only in 2013 they decided to they won, for example, Penang, Perak, and Selangor. Okay, so there's a time gap actually. So Sabahans are much more advanced in terms of the tsunami. The tsunami came earlier. Okay, and why I say Kelantan, Terengganu, and Kedah is a bit different is because PAS has been winning. For example, I think PAS has been in control of Kelantan for so long, since Semangat 46. Terengganu is a swing. Terengganu and Kedah is a swing state. It goes to UMNO, it goes to PAS, it goes to UMNO, it goes to PAS. So my whole point is, sometimes when the voters in Peninsular Malaysia, when they look down on Sabah, so sometimes I would say, why don't you look at history? We were more advanced in terms of having our own tsunami back then in 1985. Okay, next slide. And then the other one also that I call them KL or Peninsula voters, they like to look down on the rural voters of Sabah, and then they think that urban voters are cleverer than the rural voter. But I just give you this one example. For example, in Sabah, for the 2020 polls, which was last year, the opposition won in almost all urban seats, while there were 3 independent which won rural seat. So these urban voters is kind of an interesting voters actually. Whether good or bad, it's up to you all to judge. But for example, if a particular party put anybody, or if just say they put me as a candidate, their candidate in an urban seat, I'm very sure I'll win. Yeah, I got 5 more minutes. Okay, so definitely I will win. So for them, the urban voters, for them is they don't really care about the candidate. It's about the party flag. Although it can be nepotism, actually, it can be actually somebody's daughter or somebody's son contesting, or the candidate can be a lousy candidate, but they don't care. They will just go for the party lambang. So sometimes I find that, isn't it better you go for the candidate and not for the party lambang? But that is subjective. Whereas the rural voters are cleverer. For them is 3 seats in the rural area voted for bebas. And why? It's because they chose somebody that they trust, they know, they're familiar with. So they voted for him instead of just say the UMNO candidate or even the opposition candidate. Okay, next slide, please. This is the best thing. Whenever you think of Sabah politics, people think of this frog. Okay, so people think that, okay, Sabah created the frog culture, etc., etc., etc. But there's a bit of irony actually. When you look at this poster, it is Warisan, which is saying that kill off the frog culture. But the interesting thing is, Warisan became government in the year 2018 when this kind of creature jumped. Okay, but the thing is, my whole point is actually in Peninsular Malaysia also you have frogs. It's not something that Sabah dominates. For example, like give you example, Bersatu, when the Prime Minister was Mahathir, he encouraged UMNO MPs to jump. Okay, so I leave it to that. Okay, next what? And I would like to end. That's Sabah Politics 101. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Philip. Yeah, we shall later listen to all the questions. At this point of time, I pass back to Azhar for a short selingan. Yeah, okay, giving the talk. Prof. James Chin is a professor of Asian Studies, University of Tasmania. He's the leading scholar on contemporary politics in Sabah and Sarawak, and an expert on governance issues in Southeast Asia, especially Malaysia and Singapore. James also works on island states in the South Pacific. His views are regularly sought by major news agencies around the world, including the New York Times, Financial Times, BBC, World TV, CNBC, and Bloomberg. Let's listen to Prof. James on the political dynamics of Sarawak. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Anas, and thank you very much for your kind invitation to take part in tonight's webinar. So I'm sharing my screen with you now. So basically, my presentation is a lot shorter than my good friend Philip. I'll just quickly go through with you what are the major points of Sarawak politics. Okay. So in terms of the key feature, I think it is very important to understand political culture in Sarawak. If you look at all the mainstream parties in Sarawak, their core philosophy is that there's no single ethnic group that can dominate the political process. So the thinking has always been that whatever government you set up in Sarawak, and I'm talking about the state government, the government itself must be a coalition government. And this is reflected in the fact that all the local parties in Sarawak are multiracial and multi-religious. This often doesn't happen in other states in Malaysia, but this is a core philosophy in Sarawak. Politically, if you were to draw a line in Sarawak, you can make quite a strong, powerful argument that in terms of political groupings, there's basically 3 groups in Sarawak. The first group is essentially what we call the Muslim group, and they consist of the Malay community, the Melanau community, and other Muslims in Sarawak. The second group, of course, consists of the indigenous Dayaks and other non-Muslim indigenous people. And of course, the third group are the ethnic Chinese. Now, on top of these 3 different political groupings, you also have some other major divisions in Sarawak. You have to remember that Sarawak politics is really informed by its size and the fact that it has a very small population and quite a unique history. And therefore, you will find political cleavages in terms of urban areas versus the rural area. And Sarawak also suffers from very high inequality. So if you look at the top 10% of Sarawak, you'll find that they probably own upwards of 60 to 70% of the wealth in Sarawak. There's also a big divide in terms of education levels in Sarawak, especially between the urban people and the rural people. But I think the main reason why I'm here tonight is to tell you that race and religious issues in Sarawak are not as sharp as those found in Peninsular Malaysia or Malaya. And I think the reason is, as I mentioned earlier, is part of the political culture, this core philosophy that no single ethnic group can dominate. And therefore, this leads to the attitude of acceptance that we live in a plural society, we live in a multicultural and multi-religious society. And this is also reflected on the ground where you find there are lots of intermarriages among the different ethnic groups. And one of the things that people are always surprised in Sarawak is that sometimes in a family, you've got people of different faiths. This is especially true when the children marry a Muslim person, the child converts, and most of the time it is not an issue in Sarawak. Even on the street, you can see this quite clearly in that there's no issue when you go and visit the local kopitiam where you find halal food is served together with non-halal food. Both these stores are located in the same shop. There was very little fear of visiting each other, and there's no fear of seeing the cross in public. Part of the reason why Sarawak, as I mentioned, because it's a unique history, but also part of the reasons why we have this sort of political culture in Sarawak is because for a very long period, Sarawak has been under the control of PBB, the main political party. PBB in Sarawak has been holding the chief minister's post for the past 51 years. Remember, the Federation of Malaysia is only 58 years, so they've been controlled for Sarawak for 51 years, since 1970. And one single family has dominated more than 40 years out of the 51 years. So Taib Mahmud, who is now the governor, was chief minister for 33 years. And before that, his uncle Rahman Yaakob was chief minister for 11 years. Now, of course, having these people staying around for such a long time, there's a downside to it. And the downside is that you'll find that many of the senior ministers and ministers in the state in Sarawak have been around for a very, very long time. In fact, the majority of the cabinet ministers in Sarawak has been there for more than 10 years. In fact, quite a number of them has been there for more than 20 years. I think it's very important that the viewers understand that PBB has been portrayed that it is very much the UMNO of Sarawak, but this is actually not true. PBB is not like UMNO. On the surface, they look like UMNO because they dominate Sarawak politics, but in reality, PBB is quite an interesting party. It is a party that has two separate wings. It was a merger of two very distinct parties, and one party represents the Malay Malana wing, and the other party actually represents the Dayak wing. So even today, right, if you study the PBB structure, they have quotas at every level. So if there is a person holding a Malana or Malay person holding one post, I can guarantee you the deputy will be from the Dayak wing and vice versa. The other reason why I think the political culture in Sarawak is very different is because of this dominance by PBB. They've been able to keep the main Warisan Nasional out of Sarawak. So even though for many years, GPS was the Sarawak BN, they made it very clear that the core Warisan Nasional parties in the peninsula were not welcome in Sarawak. So Sarawak is the only state in the Malaysian Federation where you do not find an UMNO branch, you do not find MIC branch, or you don't see an MCA branch. And I think this sort of tradition has been carried through in the post-Mahathir era as well. As far as I know, these core parties have no plans to extend itself into Sarawak. Now, because of this unique political culture, you also find that there's a very strong state identity in Sarawak, much, much stronger compared to Sabah. And this unique strong identity is due to its very unique history. As you know, Sarawak was ruled for 100 years by a private British family called the Brookes. It has a very unique demography and very different cultures. Because of that, the GPS policy, and in fact, even the opposition in Sarawak, their unofficial policy is Sarawak first. And that's the reason why they want to create a ring fence around Sarawak, and they're hoping for maximum autonomy under the MA63. So that's the reason why you keep hearing about MA63. A lot of the noises nowadays are actually coming out of Sarawak, because Sarawak is the only state where the mainstream Peninsular parties are not found. So in conclusion, I would argue that Sarawak politics is very different from all the rest of Malaysia. It's because the culture, political culture, that is really acceptance and pluralism. And the people of Sarawak, at the present moment at least, are not willing to change this model to the Malayan model. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prof. Very short, but very precise. Thank you so much. Yeah, we'll obviously there'll be more questions later from the crowd. For the time being, I'll pass back to Azhar. Now it's time for me to introduce Prof. Dr. Kartini. Yeah. Prof is from Institute of Ethnic Studies, University Kebangsaan. She served as Deputy Director at Institute of Ethnic Studies, KITA, UKM. She is Fulbright Scholar to Northeastern University, Boston, and for her doctoral degrees in Law, Policy and Society. She completed 5 major national policy papers and appointed consultant for Perbadanan Putrajaya on Blueprint Masyarakat Sejahtera from 2020 to today, the current day, a lead consultant for National Unity Index. She was an invited lecturer to Frankfurt Applied Sciences University for the Summer Academy Program of 2013-2015, and an appointed country constitutional for Malaysia to the United Nations Entity for Gender Equality and Empowerment of Women 2014. She's a frequent commentator for local and international media, including BBC, Al Jazeera, Channel News, Al Hijrah, Bernama TV, Singju Daily, Cosmo, Berita Harian, Malay Mail, Astro Awani, and so on. Let's listen to Prof. Kartini's sharing. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you so much, Brother Anas. Okay, let me share my slide. Okay, let's see whether it's working. Okay, greetings and good evening, everyone. Thank you, Brother Anas, for the introduction. And my topic today is about political cohesion. We have listened from Philip Golingai. I do like Philip's column. I always read Philip's column, and also our distinguished speakers, Professor James Jeans. Yeah, and I try to actually combine both to look at Sabah, Malaysia, Sarawak, and see how we can simply connect Malaysia. And like the quote from Azhar, when Azhar said that Malaysia is unique, yes, it is true. Malaysia is unique, and based on the sociological imagination concept coined by Charles Wright Mills and also Shamsul Amri on one country, 3 narrative, with Peninsula was the direct protectorate of the Queen, Borneo with the East India Company, and Sarawak, a single family of Raja Brooke. And we can see that how history defines the structure and the biography of the people. If we have to date it back from the Chronicle of Malacca that embraced pluralism to the colonial heritage of the institution, also the retain of major elements of the whole society, people of origin, which is stated in the constitutional monarchy, including the monarch, the Islam, the Bahasa Melayu, and the special position of Malays and Bumiputra, and other elements, namely the vernacular education, the variety food and cuisine, the race-based politics, the heterogeneous non-governmental organization, and so forth. These are actually the foundation that form Malaysia. Again, the keyword today is the history that shapes the structure and defines the biography of the people. Okay. Is it working? Oh, it's not working. I'm so sorry. Yeah. So this is the first slide that I tried to define. Okay. And the following slide is about the evolution of unity, the early understanding and the current understanding. Okay. We can see that, as I have explained earlier, as a result of this pre- and post-colonial heritage, Malaysia struggles to give a straightforward narrative, especially on the nation state, and based on series of empirical research, for example, survey conducted on the National Unity Index on 2018. We have more than 5,700 respondents. And this Unity Plan of Action, which is yet to be tabled in the Parliament, with more than 50,000 respondents, an open-ended survey, we can summarize 3 main points. Looking at this slide, first is after the conflict, after the ethnic conflict in 1969 to 2013, Brother Anas was part of the NUCC also. For 43 years, the narrative about unity in Malaysia was simplistic and literal, meaning that the strategy was more of the immediate strategy to restore peace quickly with the introduction of NEP. And then we can see a series of jamuan durian, if you look back at the history, banned every weekend, and literal seeing as simplistic when you see that Malay, Chinese, Indian together, that was unity. So that was what I term as the early understanding of unity. What we are proposing is after the National Unity Consultative Council of 2013 is actually mark a great transition to introduce a new understanding of unity, which is the tri-concept. Consists of unity that we desire, unity that we desire, cohesion that we achieve, and reconciliation, which is still progressing. So because of these tri-concept and the demand for the reconciliation, putting us in a position to continuously create integration platform on the principle of bargaining, negotiation, and mediation. Because if we disagree on a matter, we try to find a way to resolve it. I think that's how the Malaysian way of resolving conflict. And the third point is the early understanding of unity is still predominant in the mind of most politicians and academicians. Since so many of us are left behind with the earlier notion of unity, we kind of stuck in the mud. We can discuss that more detail later. Okay. The next slide is on the cohesion. As we say that unity is what we desire, what we achieve is cohesion. So let me explain what exactly is cohesion. We achieve cohesion because the society is constantly experiencing a moment of agreeing to agree and agree to disagree. We were continuously defining peace as the absence of violence. For example, if you look at this calendar, we can agree on the Malaysian calendar, diverse with multi-religion celebration. The mosque, the temple, the churches are printed next to one another. And more interesting, the race horse is just next to the mosque. So this calendar is actually created as the people innovation at the bottom. There is no instruction from the Prime Minister Department or Prime Minister Office. So how false it is to see Malaysia within the simplistic label of authoritarianism or failed state, because we believe that our citizens are more creative in terms of making their way out of resolving the conflict. And also, if we look at this space of disagreement, there are social deficits which can be determined based on 9+1 categories. Why 9+1? Because during the NUCC, it was during Najib, when we conducted the research for the survey and the town hall dialogue, we identified 9 main categories that we term as social deficits. And after Pakatan Harapan won the government in 2018, we were called to actually conduct another research to see is there any new category being that can be identified during the Pakatan Harapan. Interestingly, we can see that the 9 categories remain, but we added another one, which is the media. Okay, so we can always we listen to all the grievances tonight from the voters, issues on rural areas, issue on the cultural aspect. We can always challenge ourselves to put an exercise whether we would be able to identify the social deficit and simply slot them into these categories. Okay. So, sorry. Okay. The next slide is on the Malaysia Agreement 1963. Okay. Because I said that we are in this cohesion level. This is MA 1963 is actually the acceptance of cohesiveness. MA 1963 signed on 16 September 1963, amended in 1976. Clause 2 in Article 1 of the Federal Constitution still maintain the equal partnership. If you have to look carefully, try to differentiate them. Still maintain the equal partnership in the Federation. And the changes in this 1976 Clause 2 does not reduce Sabah and Sarawak possession. Let us be clear on that. Okay. And of course, again, to showcase the acceptance of cohesiveness, we can see that our duly respect to MA 1963, each Sabah and Sarawak was given recognition to have their say on points best to represent what the states need. Okay, in a simple understanding to look at, although we can hear the micro perspective being detailed, explained by Professor James just now and also Mr. Philip Golingai. Okay, and what I count for tonight is the term political cohesion, because the reality is that there are still few issues that occur on and off. As we say that we are in this state of cohesion, we face a lot of agree to agree and agree to disagree. So when we are looking at Sabah and Sarawak, okay, there are a few issues that still being viewed as the deficits. A deficit that need attention and need deliberate ways to manage them. If we look here, we can see the formation of federation, the constant debates over the merging without comprehensive consensus, the ongoing issues on the marginalization of the indigenous people, the dominance of Malaya political model, the federal intervention in state politics, issues on party illegal immigrant in Sabah, and of course, the issues on the underdevelopment, issues on inclusivity. That would be looking at how we have to simply accept and recognize that we are in the state of cohesion. Because of that cohesion, we acknowledge that we still have deficits to manage. Okay? While in Semenanjung, we can see that the struggle over the nation state continues and turns into the nation of intent. As I think Philip did mention about how everyone, YB Senator T. Lian Ke did mention how everyone has a very different dream in giving the narrative who we are, who they are. So we are looking at the nation of intent is a competing, continue to become a competing idea about what exactly is Malaysia. Okay. And same goes when we discuss about the competing nation of intent. There's issues on Bumiputra-led plural society, Malaysia. As we always compare ourselves with Singapore, ironically, minority in Singapore are unable to enjoy equality and equity too. Okay? And issues on the Islamic State, the idea of Melayu Raya, the undulating political electoral landscape, as Philip said, Sabah has parliamentary seat, 25 parliamentary seats. Sarawak has 31 parliamentary seats. So they would like to ask more, perhaps, considering that because of the population, perhaps, and issues on the shift from consociation to a strategic alliance. We can witness how the issues on Muafakat Nasional, from Perikatan Nasional, and then we have Pakatan Harapan, and then issues on the changes of 3 PMs in less than 5 years, issues on election, and also social media. If I have to actually be a little bit detailed on the media also create a challenge for us to identify the origin of the sources because of the freedom of expressing that we enjoy. The differences of sources from where they come are the sources from the people. This news exactly is a syndicated news organized or constructed by an agency abroad to destabilize the country, because we observe and we learn from the Arab Spring and also the pro-democratic movement in Hong Kong. Changes are constructed and concerted And it could be anchored by another agency abroad. If we have to read book by Gene Sharp, From Authoritarianism to Democracy, published by Albert Einstein Institute, he clarifies the meaning of regime change, which is constructed and concerted by the agencies abroad. Or much more easy for you who love movies, you can simply go and watch American Made to see how it was done. The role and the function of the CIA and how the Latin America and the movie played by Tom Cruise. You can simply look at American Made. And my final slide, because it's given 15 minutes. The key idea is looking at the reconciliation as the integration platform. And of course, looking at the MA63, it is a form of integration platform because it united three different countries into one, a union of 3 countries into one. And if we have to look at the federal constitution, we can see how it protects the Malays and the non-Malays as well. The Bumiputra issues on the institutional transform. We can see that how we would like to be optimistic and moving forward with a better Malaysia. And of course, unity in diversity, to accept the fact that we are not embracing unity in uniformity, but embracing diversity as a one nation. Of course, because of that, we use reconciliation as a platform of integration to resolve the problem in our society. Even though the integration platform is actually a generic term that describes effort in finding ways to resolve the problem based on the principle of bargaining, negotiation, and mediation. And voila, we can see that the memorandum of understanding between the government and Pakatan Harapan could be mark the significance of this principle to resolve the political struggle. And I think for that, I end my presentation. Thank you, Brother Anas and Azam. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Now we'll go to the question time. Firstly, thank you for many of you who have sent questions during registration. Due to the limited time that we have, I will only pick questions which is within the topic of today's, or the one that's closest to today's topic, which is political dynamics in Sabah, political dynamics in Sarawak, and political dynamics in Semenanjung. Yeah, so it's not that your questions are not important, some of your questions are important, but I will pick the one that's nearest to the topic at hand. So the first question, I think all 3 speakers can share their opinion, is from Gopal Balakrishnan. It says here, what are the most significant underlying causes that contribute to the differences in the social attitudes of Sabah, Sarawak, and Semenanjung? Here you talk about social attitudes. Anyone wants to share? Yeah. Social attitudes. Maybe Philip?
Okay, I'll try. The question is a bit tricky.
Yeah, that's why I thought it's a very wide question. Yeah?
Wide, but
I think we want to pin it down.
I just pin down a bit. I think the difference between, just say, Sabah and then and also the same with Sarawak, difference with voters in Peninsula is, I think they are very silo in Peninsula Malaysia. For example, I give you one example. I went for a wedding in Kedah, Mahathir Khalid's area, and I was the only non-Malay there. Okay, whereas when you go to Sabah, you will have Malay, Chinese, and other religion, and even in a family, there will be Muslim family, and then there will be Christian family or Buddhist, etc. So there's many intermarriages in Malaysia. Therefore, they are more tolerant in terms of the other race. So silo versus a family with multi-religious background. That's how I answer it.
All right. Any other speakers wants to share? Okay, then I'll go to the next question. I'll pick the one that I consider nearer to the topic at hand. This is a very interesting question by Adrian Matthew Das. Yeah. Why is there still the idea of Sabah for Sabahans and Sarawak for Sarawakians? Then maybe, Prof. James can talk about, the idea why is there Sarawak for Sarawakian. Maybe after that, Philip, you can say something about Sabah for Sabahans. And perhaps after that, what would someone from Peninsula feel? Maybe Prof. Kartini will say something. Maybe Prof. James, you want to start?
Thank you, Anas.
Yes. Yeah.
I think the answer I would give is will probably apply to Sabah as well. So basically what we're talking about is an issue called historical grievances. So the bottom line is that the people of Sabah and Sarawak feel that they got a raw deal when they joined or they helped form the Federation of Malaysia. They feel that too many things have gone wrong. Too many of the promises made were not kept. But I think what has happened is that basically the people of Sabah and Sarawak feels quite strongly that they've not only been left out of the mainstream of development, but what is really adding to the wound is the fact that they feel that a lot of the resources taken from Sabah and Sarawak ended up in building Peninsula Malaysia. So for example, the first superhighway in North-South Highway was actually built in the 1980s. The highway linking Sabah and Sarawak is not even completed yet. It will be completed in 3 years' time. So you can see a gap of almost 30 years.
Yes.
If you look at the what do you call it, the landscape or even the simple things like infrastructure in Sabah and Sarawak, I would argue that is probably at least 10 to 15 years behind Malaya. So a lot of it is got to do with basic grievances in terms of development, but a bigger portion of it is this idea of historical grievances, that some of the things that were promised at the time of the formation of Malaysia, a lot of it was not kept. And that's the reason why it's sort of floating up to the surface. I also think that it's also floating up to the surface is because the Malay political establishment in Peninsula Malaysia sort of split from 2008 onwards. Certainly after 2008 onwards, the Malay political establishment had to rely on the Warisan MPs from Sabah and Sarawak to stay in power. So suddenly because of that, they started looking towards Sabah and Sarawak. As you know, right, previously, before 2008, the attitude of the Malay political establishment in Malaysia was that Sabah and Sarawak were fixed deposit. They can be led easily. They're sort of underdeveloped politically, and we can always rely on them to vote for the Dutching. So after 2008, I think they realized that things were a bit different. So that's the reason why when Najib came in, one of the first things he did was he made Malaysia a public holiday in recognition of Sabah and Sarawak. He made the speaker, the 2 deputy speakers, House of Parliament from East Malaysia, and he gave an additional $1 billion development funds to Sabah and Sarawak. So I think those are the major reasons why I think there is a lot of happiness in Sabah and Sarawak. And I also want to make the point that this is quite an important thing in the sense that we know from contemporary history that if there is a compelling narrative like what you have in Sabah and Sarawak, if these historical grievances are not dealt with in a serious manner, it can lead to all sorts of unfortunate things in the future.
Thank you, Prof. Yeah, thank you very much. Philip, any comments from your side?
Yes, okay. I would like to explain the why Sabah for Sabahan or Sarawak for Sarawakian. I will use Temenggung Joga's analogy as an example. He said when Sabah, or maybe he just talk about Sarawak, when Sarawak formed Malaysia, he said, don't treat us like sugar cane, where you chew the sweetness and then you leave us with the, you take away all the sweetness. Okay, it's the same as what Professor James Chin talked about the development. You look at, for Sabahan, when they look at KLCC, they see it as Sabah oil or maybe Sarawak oil. Okay, that's number one. Number two, I think it's also as I say, Sabahans are much more open to other religion. So when they see this like incidences like okay, the trolley that it has to be halal trolley, etc., etc. So Sabahans from both sides of the religion or all religion, they will be like, hey, kenapa macam itu? Why are they like that? So they get worried. They don't want to be sucked into this a very Peninsula Malaysia, perhaps, but not the Bangsa crowd. Bangsa crowd can can mix their cocktail. Okay, so roughly that is the two major thing, I think. Thanks.
Thank you. I think very good feedback for people from Peninsular Malaysia to listen.
Yes, Anas.
Yes, yeah. How about Dr. Kartini? Yeah.
Yes, just a small opinion. Yeah. When we talk about Sarawak, especially when Philip said that when you look at the KLCC, people are seeing is the oil money from Sarawak or Sabah. But yet again, we have to understand that when the Petronas was formed, it was the idea of Rahman Yaakob, Sarawakians, and also the idea of percentage, how many should be contributed from the state back to the federal. And of course, I just like to share a research. 5 years ago, we Institute of Ethnic Study kita conducted a research to understand Sabah Sarawak Keluar Malaysia, the SSKM, and try to understand the social media. Okay? And it was kind of fascinating because when we did this group interview with people, local people from Sabah and Sarawak, okay? And first we started with this Sabah in a few places, and of course, and later in Sarawak. It seems like the idea of SSKM is clearly being constructed by a group of those who see the grievances that they would like to highlight and make alert of the federal people at the federal or even at the state government. So meaning that when we receive any comment or grievances, we have to take it with a pinch of salt and do more research to understand what exactly is the grievances, not to the extent of they would like to be separated from the federal. So different views, different perspectives, different group, social classes, and we have to actually be truthful and be careful looking at who is actually playing this about the grievances, and if there is a grievances that we notice and realize, how do we create a situation where we can always negotiate and be able to resolve the issues, rejecting the violence and more practical way of making it possible for Sarawak and Sabah to work out the issues in much more feasible manner. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it's a very good chance for us to listen to Sabah and Sarawakian and to see, how their feelings are. Yeah, and I think it's a very nice feedback. And,
can I just come in here? I feel that I better say something here because
yes,
I think it's quite strange that Professor Kartini has brought this issue SSKM. What I'm talking about is historical grievances. If you're talking about the secessionist movement, Sabah Sarawak Keluar Malaysia, that is totally what they call it. It is it's a totally different thing. What I'm talking about is basic grievances about the fact that the federal state system is not working. And I think one of the important points, a very, very important point, was raised by Philip in his presentation. That throughout the starting from actually it started from late 60s, but the big numbers came in the 1980s. That there was a deliberate attempt that was engineered from Kuala Lumpur by the federal government to change the demography of Sabah. So basically, you got dispossession of the native people of Sabah, basically 1/3 of the Sabah population. And this can be proven not only by academic studies, but by sheer statistics. There is no way that the Sabah's population can rise by 390% in a space of 25 years, unless every Sabahan girl was having 20 babies, that sort of thing. So I mean, when you talk about these things, I think the grievances are real. And I think the fact that you're downplaying it, I think it does a real disservice, not only to yourself, but also the fact that you try to keep promoting kita. Because I think the grievances are real. And I think that
I'm not rejecting the grievances that you are saying. I just want to say that some part of the grievances need an extra careful research. As you said, I would agree with what you say when some of the grievances are true. Okay.
I think it's a very good feedback, and I think we should listen. We look at the historical side, and the purpose of this program is to see, understand, especially for people from Peninsula, to listen to people from Sabah and Sarawak. Whether the numbers and all that we can check later, but we want to know about the feelings. Yeah. Thank you very much. I think this takes us to the next question by Jayum Anak Jawan. I will read the question, but I'll try to paraphrase because I feel there's something like what we're talking about right now. This to follow up. He says here, is the dynamic of politics really that different in Sabah, Sarawak, and Semenanjung? It's not a dynamic shaped by the powerful Peninsular Malays who command majorities in 126 Semenanjung seats, as compared to 222 seats in Parliament. Yeah, and it says, how would Sabah's 25 and Sarawak's 31 play such a big role in national politics? I think maybe we can discuss a little bit about the power distribution or power base between the center and the state. I think it's good if, let's say, all three speakers can give a bit of comment. How is our, how can we work so that in the future, or at least where we are right now, where we want to be and what's to be done, how can we make sure the state and the federal power, what you call sharing, how would be better for Malaysia? Maybe I'll start with, again, I'll go Sabah, Sarawak, Semenanjung, and maybe Philip, the state and the center to the state.
Okay, I think it comes in terms of for Sabah. Let me talk about Sabah.
Yeah.
I think we have to have Sabah MPs or even Sabah leaders who are more honest to themselves, and then they protect the state interest. I just give you an example. If I'm not mistaken, in the year 2018, when Warisan had to rely, it was half-half in Semenanjung between, just say, PR and BN is half-half. They needed Sabah and Sarawak MPs. And then I think it's the first time we had maybe 7 ministers from Sarawak and 6 ministers from Sabah. However, unfortunately, I don't want to talk about the Sarawak ministers, but unfortunately, I think most of our, not all, most of our 6 ministers from Sabah, they were seeing, they kind of let down the state actually. And that was the opportunity because it was Sabah and Sarawak which was forming the government. Yes, we did get today, for example, we're getting that holiday. But for me, is what's the big deal of getting a holiday? It's only 1 day. We should have demanded more. Okay, so that's the thing. Sometimes it's the Sabah MP themselves who let down Sabahan. I'm not saying all of them. They are good MPs out there, but it's sometimes Sabahan themselves who betray Sabahans. Thanks.
Thanks. Maybe James say something.
Okay,
I think there's a need to the question. There's a lot of questions are somewhere around the area. It's about the power of distribution of power between federal and the state. There are quite a few other questions. May not be written directly on like that, but I read it. Yeah.
Look. I think we all try to beat around the bush here. I'll be
Yes.
very blunt. I think the problem is the current federal-state relationship, or the current federal-state setup. The way it's set up in Malaysia, right? Is that it's all about centralization of power in the federal government. Now, this normally works in the federal system if you don't have states that are too different. So in the case of Sabah and Sarawak, these states have different history, different demography, different narratives. And when they came and create this federation, it was understood that they will have a certain degree of autonomy. They will have certain special rights or what have you. I don't want to go into details, but basically they don't fit into this mold very well. So during the first Martin administration, he basically centralized all the powers into the federal government. And since then, the federal government has been all powerful. Now, why is there a tension here? There is a strong tension here, as I mentioned, historical grievances. But on top of that, the one of the big issues is that you have a deliberate attempt by the federal government to export its model, its political model, to the domestic politics of Sabah and the domestic politics of Sarawak. Now, it's quite interesting that here we're trying to talk about political dynamics, but I haven't heard anybody here talk about the core political dynamics in Peninsular Malaysia. Okay, I think it's very important that we have to be very clear what we're talking about. We're talking about exporting this very racial Malay versus non-Malay, Ketuanan Melayu philosophy, all these things, trying to export it to Sabah and Sarawak. And because of that, there's a reaction from the people on the other side. Because the people on the other side are used to a much more pluralistic form of politics. And when the federal government intervenes, in the case of Sabah, they've intervened in a very blatant way. In Sarawak, the last time they intervened in a blatant way was 66. But in Sabah, they've intervened so many times. You know, they intervened in the 60s, putting Mustafa Harun in place. 75, they put in, Hari Saleh. They intervened in 1990, they intervened in 1994. And as I said, they changed the demography of Sabah. So all these things, right, create a reaction on the ground. Basically, people are not stupid. They live in a political system, but they don't live in a bubble. They can feel this sort of thing coming towards them and they don't like it. So there's a strong reaction from the ground up.
But perhaps, Prof. James, you can unpack how did Sarawak manage to somehow or another keep the power within PBB, or rather, Sarawak, I think the meddling, if I use the word meddling, of federal in Sabah is far more than Sarawak. So maybe you can share how did that work out how did Sarawak do that?
Sarawak did it in a very simple way. Like I said, for 51 years, basically political power was held by a single party. That party, PBB, was under the control of a single family. And Taib Mahmud actually did a deal with Mahathir. It was actually a written agreement that Mahathir will not export the BN model to Sarawak. Sarawak was left alone as long as Sarawak was under the control of the Sarawak Warisan National. Sarawak became a fixed deposit and they did not challenge the Malay hegemony in West Malaysia. The reason why it fell apart in Sabah was in the 1980s, there was a rise of Kadazan Dusun nationalism with the rise of PBS. PBS directly challenged the federal government set up the political model. So you can see it very clear, right? In 1990, PBS at the very last minute jumped to the other side. And 1 year later, MCA, UMNO, everybody jumped into Sabah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Maybe
I'm sorry to be blunt, but I feel that this is going to be a real academic discussion at a university level.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's not beat around the bush.
Yes, yeah. I know. I think because I was looking at all the questions, we will look at the trend of the question. I think here, this one from Free Malaysia Today. I hope all three speakers will contribute. Hi, I'm Aina from FMT. Was wondering if we can get panelists' views on MA63 reforms as stated in the bipartisan MOU. Many have stated their doubts. Yeah, so I think I'll put the doubts aside. I think I want to hear what are your recommendations. I think this is a part, rather than deal in the doubt, say what are your recommendations on what should be done, for immediately, urgently towards MA63 in this context. Maybe each one of you can give a little bit idea. What do you think should be done to so-called solve this problem, or at least mitigate the problem? I'll again start with, maybe this time around, I'll start Dr. Kartini. I'll go in reverse. Dr. Kartini first. Yeah.
Hi, okay. Good questions on the MA63. One of the memorandum of understanding signed by the government and PH recently is MA63. So if we have to review again the Sabah 20 points and the Sarawak 18 points, we can see that from religion down to land, forest, and local government, of course, issues on inclusivity development could be the highlights and things that the federal should consider on how. But I do believe with the word by Philip just now, he said that Sabah and Sarawak actually need a strong leader to champion Sabah and Sarawak issue, because they understand the locals better and they know what exactly the issues within the local to be put forward. And again, when we discuss about federal and state, it is clear that MA63 has pointed out more of the autonomy to Sabah and Sarawak to enjoy what the idea of autonomy itself. And even we, Semenanjung, we have to carry our passport to enter Sabah and Sarawak. So we respect that, and we respect that Sabah 20 points and Sarawak 80 points. And they can always look at how moving forward is to actually discuss on the idea of how the formation of federation itself, in terms of how comprehensive the consensus can be built in terms of looking at the marginalization of indigenous people, perhaps, and looking at how issues on illegal immigrant in Sabah can be resolved.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kartini. Yeah, James, what would your recommendation?
Okay, to understand why it was in the MOU, you need to understand that was a last-minute insertion. That's the reason why there are no details.
Yeah.
Basically, what will happen before the thing expire in July next year? The number one priority, because the law minister is from Sarawak, the number one priority will be the Constitution Amendment, the one that fell in 2019. They want a symbolic victory, because if that Constitution goes through, Constitution Amendment goes through back to the so-called 1963 wording, there were no implications in any other part of the Constitution. There's no financial implication. There's no other play. It's purely a symbolic act. So that will be the number one item they will work on. All the other items, GPS has already said they want to amend other items. They want to change the nature of the financial relationship. They want to take something back, and they want some of the power to be devolved. But I can tell you those things cannot be done if the deadline is July next year.
Yeah,
so I think they will go for the first one, which is the Constitution Amendment.
Right. Thank you, James. Philip?
Okay, for me, it's because I've covered politics and I'm a bit cynical of politician. And then the putting in the MA 63 is just like, they just put it like they put it in their manifesto. And then they had the chance when they were in government, and then they actually didn't bother about Sabah and Sarawak in terms of PH. So I have a funny feeling that there's no sincerity. That's all.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, I think I heard that it's the last minute thing, James, and also Philip. Yeah. Okay, I think here is an interesting twist of a question by Richard Yeo. West Malaysians complain, they are treated like foreigners, even after 20 years of more residing there and married to locals. They are denied PR. Yet East Malaysians can freely work and live in Malaya. Very archaic after 58 years. This is the opposite feeling. Yeah, so maybe you can have, Philip, you can comment. I go back the other way around.
Okay.
These are people from Peninsula, from Semenanjung, who feel that when they are there, I think many don't understand why you have to show your IC or your passport. I think they don't understand, and why are they feeling, like they feel like they are, there's a line, yeah.
Okay, first of all, maybe we need to do a study whether the allegation is correct. But then my sense is most of my friends who are from Peninsular Malaysia, they live in Sabah, they marry Sabahan, technically they become Sabahan. I don't see because I think Sabah is less strict than Sarawak. They can actually work and live in Sabah without needing the work permit, etc., etc. It's all kind of like pretend actually in terms of the Sabah context, because Sabah in terms of immigration, etc., etc., is much more loose. So in terms of Sabah, I don't really buy that argument that they can't really live in Sabah. They have kids who, recently I was talking to one of these lecturer. His kid the IC is 12, meaning he's technically a Sabahan. Thanks.
All right, James, any comment? Yeah.
Look, when you take out individual stories, there's always individual stories. You can also talk about individual stories of Sabahans and Sarawakians who were denied jobs in Peninsular Malaysia because they were seen as not as competent as Malayans. So I don't think you should take a single case as an example. All I know is that, yes, it is true that Sarawak maintains a very strict immigration rules, but it's also my understanding that if your wife or your partner is from Sarawak, staying there will not be a problem.
Right, thank you very much. I think the next question will be interesting to play around with. Yeah? And I hope to hear from all three of you. Yeah? I will start Dr. Kartini, and then I'll go to James and Khalid. Many feel that Warisan should come to Malaya. Again, this is a political party from Sabah or Sarawak, should, also move into Peninsula and lead a new brand of multiracial politics. Maybe just a comment from Dr. Kartini first, and then I'll go to James and then Philip. Dr. Kartini, sound. Microphone. Dr. Kartini, microphone. Dr. Kartini, we can't hear you.
Yes, sorry.
All right, yeah.
Well, as I said earlier, with duly respect to the MA63, because of that, as we have heard from Philip and also from James' team, for Sarawak, they are clear. They would be impossible for the Peninsula Party to enter Sarawak, and of course, asking from the Warisan Sabah to come to Semenanjung would be also a difficult story to begin with, because as I said earlier, we have to look again at our history. Clearly, that we are so different in terms of how we define our identity, the way we define ourselves, the way we move and function in the local situation, which is completely different based on history and also from the current situation. So in that case, respecting the MA63, respecting the Sabah 20 point and the Sarawak 18 point, I think it is best to allow Warisan to actually lead and become strong in Sabah, and hopefully we can find someone who could champion issues of Sabah and Sarawak in much more progressive way, and hopefully it will help to determine how the social deficit that we identified can be reduced in a more strategic and comprehensive way. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr.
So the question was about Warisan moving to Peninsula Malaysia.
Yes, I think it is best for Warisan to stay in Sabah rather than coming to Peninsula. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe James, your opinion?
There's a big challenge for Warisan. Yeah.
Look, I think we're all beating around the bush, because when I took part in this seminar, the title was about political dynamics. So I think Philip and I gave a brief rundown of the political dynamics of our respective states, but I'm still waiting to hear what are the core political dynamics in Peninsula Malaysia. The reality is Warisan is moving to Peninsula Malaysia for very, very specific purposes. I think it will they will appeal to a certain segment of the urban electorate who are sick and tired of the current politics in Peninsula Malaysia. Whether they'll make an impact or not in GE15, that remains to be seen. I think it's too early to second guess what are the chances of Warisan, for a simple reason that, because of COVID-19 and the fact that we have an ailing economy, GE15 will actually be how should I say it? It will not be the normal elections that we're used to. So I think it will be an interesting experiment, as this is the first time a major political party from both the Borneo states is trying to create a presence in Peninsula Malaysia.
Well,
there is no history. There's no history to look back on, so I'm not going to try and second guess.
All right, thank you. How about Philip? Yeah.
Okay, for me it's quite simple. It's the KL urban crowd. They're very excited that Warisan is coming down, because I think maybe they are a bit tired of PKR's dream of becoming PM, etc., etc. But for me, the big question is for the Peninsula Malaysia, especially the urban crowd. I call them the Bangsa bubble. Do they actually know Warisan actually? Is their image of Warisan just Shafi Abdal? Do they know the vice president of Warisan? Do they know his court cases? Do they know that Warisan encourage assemblyman to jump, and therefore they form the party? So those are my question actually. They just see it as Shafi and then they are very happy. But don't they know Shafi when Shafi was with UMNO? So those are I'm just raising questions because I'm from Sabah, so I have to jaga hati of my fellow Sabahans. Thanks.
Thank you for your honest feedback. Actually, that's what we want. We want honest feedback. We want to listen. I want to hear opinions.
Can I just quickly say something here?
But I think it is not pragmatic to see what is said to be in Peninsula. As Philip already said, no one knows Shafi'i in a personal basis. And you can see that in Semenanjung, we have so many parties representing the Malays. And if Warisan come here, I don't think it's the practical way. It's best for Warisan to stay in Sabah and simply rally support and champion Sabah's issue instead of coming to Peninsula. It could be a way of committing suicide. Who knows?
Yeah. James, you're saying, thanks, Dr. Kartini. Yeah. I think this is the beauty. I think conflict is good. I'm one of those who believe that with conflict, we'll move forward in life. As long as our conflict remain, verbal and, with kesopanan dan kesusilaan, I think that's where we have to be to make this country move forward. We need to bring out things to the open and discuss about it. We can agree to disagree. James.
I wasn't going to disagree with the other two panelists. I just wanted to remind Philip that while all the things that he mentioned is true, the other thing that's very true is that Malaysians have very short memory. Somebody was involved in a multi-billion-dollar financial scam, but he's still the most popular politician on the other side. While it is true that people may know Shafi's history, whatever it is, during election time, it depends on how you package the narrative. People have short memories.
Thank you very much. It's been a great evening. I would like to end by asking each speaker to perhaps share your hopes. Today is Malaysia Day. Share your hopes of how Sabah, Sarawak and Semenanjung we can come together and make Malaysia truly better, and we can move forward and more united. Maybe I will start with Philip and then Sabah, Sarawak and Semenanjung.
Okay, mine is very simple actually. Mine is it's actually many in Peninsula, they don't understand Sabah and Sarawak. So for me, is to know Malaysia is to love Malaysia. It's an old Malaysian tourism slogan. So for me is people in Peninsula Malaysia, especially now that you can't get out of the country to visit Medan, Hong Kong, or God knows where, I think the best thing is now, like for example, Sarawak has opened already. There's no self-quarantine if you are fully vaccinated. So for me, is to know Malaysia is to visit Sabah and to visit Sarawak. Once you understand Sabah and Sarawak, maybe you'll be less ignorant or you'll be more ignorant. But the best is let's do this you should cross the South China Sea. It's the same for Sabahan also. You should visit Sarawakian or you should visit Peninsula Malaysia to understand the other side. Itu saja. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Philip. James.
So I think I actually think that for the last few years, especially since 2018, I think we can see a sea change now, especially this year. The last time I looked, there were 14 webinars devoted exclusively to the issue MS63 in Sabah and Sarawak. In other words, there is a lot of interest. People are getting exposed to the issues. And for the very first time, I think it's no longer the political class talking about MS63. I think among the middle class, among the urban class, and I think some parts of the rural community, people are curious as to why is it that, for so long, for almost 50 years, we never heard any noises coming out of East Malaysia because they were saying it's fixed deposit. Why is it suddenly, we're seeing this high level of unhappiness, asking for autonomy, asking for this, asking for that. So I think it's actually a very good thing. And I think this year is sort of a sea change that everyone's talking about it. And I think that in terms of what Philip says is absolutely true, you need to visit. But I think far more important, I think it's important that people are actually exposed to this idea that that the Malaysia is not simply one narrative. There's actually a different sort of narrative and dynamics in Sabah and Sarawak, and that this sort of Malaysia being a single mode, single narrative, single model, this thing has never existed in reality. This was basically created for lack of a better word, created by the system in order to promote a certain thing. So I think things like Sabah and Sarawak being part of everyday conversation, especially around this time of the year, I think only good things can come out of it.
Thank you, Prof. Yeah. Dr. Kartini. Yeah.
Yeah, I think from tonight, we have to see Sabah and Sarawak no longer as the fixed deposit, but the kingmaker. We have to see them as the kingmaker. They are strong. As Malaysia, we have to stay as one. Although we accept and recognize our diversity, and because of that, with diversity, we move forward with a strong and a better nation. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think it's been a very wonderful evening. We have listened, from 3 distinguished speakers, and I think many of us learned new things here. And I'll have more tarik talk with Philip after this. Yeah. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Prof. James, Kartini, and Philip. I pass back to Azhar.